Humans. Without a doubt, the smartest animal on Earth. Yet we're unmistakably tied to our ape origins. Millions of years ago, we were apes living ape lives in Africa. So how did we get from that to this? What happened? What set us on the path to humanity? The questions are huge, but now there are answers. At the threshold of humanity, one ancestor contains tantalizing secrets. It is known as Homo erectus.
Homo erectus had a slightly smaller brain, slightly bigger jaw, but it's basically us.
Basically us. Almost 2 million years ago. New finds are revealing the truth about the ancestors at the heart of our evolution. Here were the trailblazers who first left Africa, the first fire makers, the first hunters.
These creatures were capable of analyzing possible uses of tools and coming up with a technological solution to the problem of how you kill a big dangerous animal without getting killed yourself.
Homo erectus pioneered what it means to be human, colonizing whole continents and creating the first human societies.
Our ancestors began to care about what others thought and care about what that individual thought about them.
Now, new discoveries are bringing them alive as never before. At last, we come face to face with the ancestors at the birth of humanity, right now on Nova. The Great Rift Valley of East Africa. 2 million years ago, these spectacular plains and canyons witnessed a mysterious event. The birth of the first ancestor we can really call human. New discoveries are revealing a creature surprisingly like us. A world traveler, a toolmaker, a hunter, tamer of fire, creator of the first human societies. Amazingly, the qualities that make us human began not with our own species, Homo sapiens. The true birth of humanity began much further back in time, millions of years ago. Imagine the entire span of recorded human history, about 5,000 years, taking us back to the Egyptian pyramids. Double it, 10,000 years, to the time when plants are domesticated and agriculture begins. Double it again, 20,000 years. Ice Age hunters are painting stunning images on cave walls, and keep doubling, 6 more times. Only then do we encounter our ancestor, Homo erectus, in Africa's Great Rift Valley. For millions of years, this massive geological fault line running the length of East Africa was a stage on which our human evolution was played out. It all started with the first apes to walk upright on 2 legs, about 6 million years ago. There were many different types, all variations on the same theme. Ape-like creatures with small brains. The fossil known as Lucy is the most famous example. Here she is, just 3 foot 8 inches tall, with a brain the size of a chimp's. For millions of years, creatures like her roamed the forests and grasslands of Africa. But then, something changed. About 2 million years ago, new creatures appeared with abilities never seen before in the animal kingdom. Meet Homo erectus, a toolmaker and hunter. One of the first members of our genus, the genus Homo, humans.
The transition to Homo was probably one of the most important transformations that occurred in human evolution.
Arms got thinner, legs got longer, brains got bigger. It was a huge evolutionary step from ape bodies to bodies like ours. But what about the things that make us distinctly human? Creativity, intelligence, caring for each other. How can we know when these got started? With only skulls and bone fragments to go on, how could we ever know what those first humans were really like? It would take a momentous find to shed light on their lives. Lake Turkana, northern Kenya. Surrounded by volcanoes and vast expanses of baking desert. In 1984, famed anthropologists Richard and Maeve Leakey were working at this remote inland sea.
I was actually on the east side of the lake, and then Richard flew over and said, "You've got to come, there's something really exciting."
As the first family of paleoanthropology, the Leakeys were used to fossil finds. But this was very special. One of Leakey's team had found a skull fragment of one of those early humans. He could tell from its size and shape it was Homo erectus. And there was more than just a fragment.
So we started looking at this site on a more extensive basis, and of course once we did, we found the rest of the skull.
A complete skull was rare enough, but it was just the beginning. Soon parts of the Homo erectus skeleton, which had never been found before, started to emerge.
We couldn't believe it, but we started getting pieces of ribs. These were parts of Homo erectus that nobody actually knew about, nobody had ever seen before. So every bone that came out of the ground was something brand new to science, and we were looking at these things, and it was really amazing.
And here they are, the actual bones of a human ancestor who lived over 1.5 million years ago. It's the earliest human skeleton ever discovered. The Leakeys called him Turkana Boy. His bones have revolutionized our understanding of the transition from ape to human.
The really important thing about Turkana Boy is how complete he is. We've got arms and legs and bits of his spine and his ribs. And usually when we find these things, we get very excited about one little bit of bone. But that little bit can't tell us very much about an individual. So having a nearly complete skeleton, we can start to ask big questions.
The first big question was, what did he look like? His skeleton tells us he was 5 feet 3 inches tall, with a build closer to a man's than an ape's. But how close? Paleo artist Victor Dieck specializes in painting and sculpting our human ancestors with precise anatomical accuracy. Victor's going to add Turkana Boy to his family of ancient faces.
At this stage of the game, I know that Turkana Boy is not an ape. He is a very early true human. And so here we have a modern human skull. The faces are very similar to one another, but Turkana Boy's skull is a bit more primitive and has a lower forehead and a much smaller brain capacity.
Victor will build Turkana Boy's face muscle by muscle, based on his studies of cadavers and modern anatomy. While his head may be primitive, Turkana Boy's skeleton is surprisingly human. His hips are a little wider, his arms a little longer, but his overall body shape is just like ours.
Turkana Boy and Erectus, that's something that if you were to see from 100 feet away, you would think, well, there's a large naked man there, or woman, or you know, but it's a human.
It will take Victor a week to flesh out Turkana Boy's face. Meanwhile, a team of animators is at work creating scenes that will bring Turkana Boy and his people to life. To make sure they do it accurately, they have enlisted the help of Harvard anthropologist Dan Lieberman.
They had a more forward position of the palms when they ran. Just slightly. There you go.
The blue-suited actors are there to create movement references for the artists. In the final animations, they will be replaced by Homo erectus bodies.
And action!
Their heads and faces based closely on Victor's model. As Turkana Boy's forensically reconstructed head nears completion, a face emerges that looks a lot like us. Now, for the first time in 1.5 million years, here he is, our ancestor, the Homo erectus, called Turkana Boy. But what he looked like is only the beginning of his story. To reconstruct his life, we need to find out how old he was.
And if we look at his skeleton, we can see that the growth plates on his limbs that would fuse when he's fully adult are all unfused. So even though he's very tall, we know that he's still growing.
The fact that Turkana Boy was not fully grown has turned out to be a boon to researchers.
You can answer questions like, did the boy grow up like a modern human? Or did he grow up more like an ape?
Turkana Boy was already 5 feet 3 inches tall.
When scientists compared his bones and teeth to ours, he seemed to be about 14 years old. But when dental specialist Chris Dean began to study his teeth, he was in for a shock. It turns out that all teeth, fossil or not, preserve a remarkably precise record of childhood.
This is a fossil tooth, and we can see the enamel cap, which covers the core of the tooth, which is made of dentine. Dentine is just another word for ivory. And within the enamel, you can see the rods, which are running from the enamel-dentine junction here out to the surface of the tooth.
Enamel has a regular growth pattern like the rings of a tree. Under an electron microscope, it looks like rods made of tiny beads.
Each of the little beads along these prisms represent 1 day's growth, because the cells which produce enamel are actually under the influence of a circadian or daily clock. And those secretions during the day speed up and then slow down, and there's a permanent record of that in every tooth. So you can see rods running all the way through this tissue, and every day along the rod there is a wobble where the tissue slows down and then speeds up.
So if you count the beads in these strings, you can figure out exactly how many days that tooth has been growing. When Chris looked at the fossilized teeth of Turkana Boy, he got a huge surprise. Turkana Boy wasn't 14 years old, he was 8.
What that implies is that the growth of the Turkana Boy resembled more closely that of chimpanzees today.
To be 5'3" at age 8, Turkana Boy must have grown up very fast, at a rate closer to chimps than us. A chimpanzee's childhood is short. It is sexually mature at about 7. Human childhood is longer. We reach puberty at about 12. So as humans evolved from apes, childhood was extended. But what advantage could be gained by having helpless children around to feed and care for who take so long to grow up? The mystery of prolonged childhood is at the heart of human evolution. It may be related to brain size. We humans have the biggest brains in the animal kingdom in relation to our body size. They're so big that most of our brain growth has to happen outside